Members of our esteemed Texas A&M Corps of Cadets, the keepers of the spirit, go on to serve fellow Americans in the world, and we saw 48 examples of that just today. But the story of one such individual caught my attention recently, and I think it captures that spirit of Aggie camaraderie and service to the individual that we're feeling today, and that I know you will take with you wherever you go. Jordan Enger, Cadet Company D2, class of 2002, was serving in the U.S. Army in Coast Afghanistan. On February 20th of 2007, Jordan attempted to shoot a suicide bomber before the bomber detonated himself and killed many others. A ball bearing from the bomber's vest blew out the lower portion of Jordan's jaw, along with 5 of his teeth. Bleeding severely, Jordan was bandaged. While waiting for the medevac chopper, it dawned on him that doctors would likely cut off his Aggie ring, which he'd worn every day during his tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we all know that you never cut off a ring. So he took his ring off, gave it to a buddy. He couldn't speak, but he nodded that he wished for the ring to be kept safe. After a 10-minute chopper ride, Jordan walked into the triage tent under his own power and was put on a table. The next thing he remembered was waking up in the ICU unit at Walter Reed Memorial Hospital in the United States. Unable to speak, with his jaw wired shut, a nurse gave him a paper to write on. He wrote, "Where is my dad?" The nurse said his father was stuck in Atlanta, a snowstorm preventing his flight to DC. But the nurse told him that 2 people were out there in the waiting room to see him, but since they were not family, they couldn't come into the ICU. The next morning, Jordan woke in a new room out of the ICU, and the nurse said the 2 people had stayed all night in the waiting room. She asked if Jordan would like to see them, and he said yes. Minutes later, 2 of Jordan's former fish buddies from Company D2 came walking in, Jonathan Murphy and Dustin Green. And Jordan later wrote this of the event: "When I saw them walk in, I started to cry. I was alone and scared before they got there. Dustin and I weren't close as cadets. In fact, we fought, and I hated Dustin. I wrote on a piece of paper, 'Dustin, why are you here? We never got along.' And Dustin replied, 'Because when we were fish, we made a promise to always be there for each other no matter what.' Dustin noticed that Jordan's ring was missing, so he took his own off his finger, slipped it on Jordan's. Then they held each other's hands and sang the Spirit of Aggie Land and stayed by his side until his father arrived." Jordan said his stay at Walter Reed was dominated by Aggies. His doctor was an Aggie and played the war hymn on the operating room speakers during the first of 5 operations. And I have this image of the nurses and the doctors swaying during the operation. He was visited in the hospital by 2 Aggie congressmen, Chet Edwards, class of 74, and Louis Gohmert, class of 75. And 2 days before he was discharged, Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, former president of Texas A&M, came to visit. Thankfully, Jordan returned home, where he was reunited with his friends and family, and also with his Aggie ring, which his fellow military friend had hand-carried back to the States. Jordan's now retired after 12 years of military service, works in commercial real estate. He and his wife, Amanda, have a 16-month-old son, and he's agreed to let me tell you this story because it represents the power of the Aggie family and the power of the gesture and the lifelong commitment we have to the success of each other. Now, students and special guests of this and the only graduation this year, I'm proud to recognize that Major Enger, class of 2002, and his wife Amanda and his son Jason are now here with us in person. Mayor Enger, would you stand, please? Let us recognize you.